Hey game developers, Chris Delion here of GamKeto. Today we're going to get an app running from Unity on the Gear VR headset. Now for starters, if you haven't seen one of these, I'm going to give you a real quick kind of breakdown of what all is involved. We've got Gear VR, this is from Samsung. Comes with this useless faceplate on the front. At best it protects your phone, at worst it blocks your phone's front camera. And the way it works is that you snap your phone into the front of it. Now, this only works with certain Samsung models. This is a Galaxy Note 5. But there's a few pieces to this. There's a volume up and down switch. There's a swipe and a tap as your main built-in input. You can also use a Bluetooth connected gamepad. There's a back button. And then for actually putting your phone in here, it took me a while to figure this out. So your USB connection, which is connected to sensors in here that tell if your phone's too close or if it's up against your face and so on. This thing is on a swivel. This other part kind of clips and locks and snaps in. Very crude. For a while I thought I was breaking it when I put my phone in. You just have to kind of get used to how it slides in there. If it's in a case, you're going to have to bust it out of a case. Most cases aren't going to fit in the front of this thing, so I have to pry it free of my Pelican with a quarter. And we put it in there. You line up of course, your gap into your the USB port. You'll see it kind of lights up because it's plugged in now. I lower it in there. And that looks way more graceful than how it was for me the first 30, 40 times shoving it in there, where I would kind of snap and force it. But I find it helps put some pressure evenly up against the corners as I push in. So again, let me do it again. I push in up here on both sides as well as kind of meet in the middle with the clamp up here. And then now it's going to project into here a different eye for each image. And that's how it's going to work. Now, the nice thing, of course, is we can build basically any game we can build in Unity, we can get running in VR using a Gear VR headset. And I assume the process is similar, but not quite identical for Google Glass and other stuff, or Google Cardboard, rather, and other stuff. Now, I'll also say, if your phone has not been cleaned in a while, this would be a good excuse, a good time to get out maybe a dab of dishwashing liquid, if that's works for your phone. It helps get my skin grease off of it. Basically, any little imperfection on your phone at all comes out really awful when it's magnified 1 inch from your face. So clean your phone, or you're going to be able to tell. Now, I'm going to be setting it up on this laptop right here because this laptop has not yet touched any VR connectivity, hasn't yet even had my Samsung phone, I think, plugged into it. So this will be a good test bed. I didn't want to show you on the laptop where I had it worked out. That would be less useful to y'all. Now, one of the things to know about setting up Gear VR, or probably any VR in 2016, is that this is still very much a changing space. Most documentation is out of date. Most videos are out of date. I expect this video will probably be useful for maybe a few weeks before it stops being valid. So here I've Googled specifically to Samsung's setup page for Mac OS X. Now, don't be scared if you're on PC. It's going to be virtually identical with a few pretty minor tweaks. And first of all, there's going to be several things we have to download. We need all of these. We need the Oculus Mobile SDK, we need Unity 5.1, we need the Java Development Kit 8, and Android SDK. We need all of that stuff. In addition to core, yeah. So let's start doing those. And I'm going to follow the link straight from this page, in part to show you that, you know, the versions are out of date, but we're going to grab the newest versions and it's still going to work for us. There's going to be a bit of kludging involved. We're going to have to get a device ID off the phone. Maybe several little steps in there. Of course, I already have Unity installed, but the rest of this stuff I do not. So first of all, start building. Let me increase my window size here. We want the mobile SDK. You'll see that already this is a version 1.0. Samsung's actual guide for Mac development was written back when it was, what, like 0.6 or something. And so, yeah, 0.6. So some things have already changed. And like I say, there's going to be constant flux in this space. Even after, I'm sure, 1.0, there'll be more changes. So that's going to be a 1 gigabit download. Thankfully, I'm in California with a good connection, so it should be pacing right along with our big city internet. I'm also going to download this Java SDK 8. Grab the DMG. Oh, I have to agree to licensing agreement. All these little tricks and traps along the way. There it is. Download Android Studio, which we also need in order to make apps for Android from Unity. So again, remember, the thing to think about is that you're really creating an Android game for your phone. It's an Android game. And then by combining it with some of these libraries for Oculus, the SDK for Oculus, Gear VR, then that's when it does the other adjustments inside Unity to make it look like it's 3D and situated it naturally handles orientation in Gear VR when you stick it in there. Now, part of what's great about this too is that all that orientation stuff, all the camera stuff, semi-automatic in terms of you can basically make a Unity game with a camera in it, compile it to your device once you have all these libraries installed, once you have the SDKs installed, drop in like a signature file in the correct location, and then you're good to go. So once you've been through this hassle, then you're in good shape. The other thing to know about this is that once you make an app for Gear VR, it's still kind of a pain to distribute. They are not intended to be just released out in the wild. I can't just make a Gear VR app and then email it to you. I mean, I can give you my Unity project, and if you already have your device ID set up onto your Gear VR headset, you can do that. But I can't just send you an app like you could like an Android APK because of that device signature matchup. That Gear wants to be in total control. Samsung wants to be in total control of which apps are on there, which apps are being used, which apps are in the wild. Now, there are apps people have built to try to get around that. So one of them is called Sideload VR. And you can see there, Sideload VR is one of the apps available for Android. And it's kind of a centralized system where people try to make apps unofficially available that bypass Samsung's approval processes and stuff. So that's also out there. It's good to be aware of. Okay, good. We're starting to get some downloads done. Let's go ahead and install these things. And I want to show you again, this is just there's been a bit of fumbling probably involved, but this is all part of the process. Okay, I'm going to install that. Of course, I've hidden files shown because I'm a programmer, like you might expect. It's going to copy all this stuff over. While it's doing that, I may as well start the SDK extraction. And the SDK isn't something I necessarily install so much as I'm just going to put it in the correct folder. And then we should be good. Yeah, so there's all that. And I'm actually going to stick that in my Unity projects folder. Make a folder called Unity Projects. Just because I don't necessarily need one of those, I think, for every single project, but it's going to be good for me to have handy when I'm doing things. And now the JDK, let's go and get that installed too. Run the update thing. I'll tell you what, man, Java's updates are annoying. I would rather not mess with them, but you know what, just for y'all, we're going to do this. Okay, so we've got the Java thing SDK installed. We should have copied over, an older versions. Yeah, replace it. Let's get the newer stuff. And copy another 800 megs over. And with those installed, now we can go into the next step. And again, I'm gonna be looking at the Samsung guide for this, acknowledging that it's probably at least partly out of date or wrong, since these things are constantly changing. Unity's already installed for me. Okay, now for setting up for development, you'll see here they say Note 4. Note 4 worked on the Innovator editions of the Gear VR. I believe Note 4 no longer works, possibly, for the consumer edition of it, but it's worth double checking. Make sure, obviously, that if you pick up a Samsung phone, that it's one that works for whatever type of Gear VR headset you pick up. Innovator was the earlier developer kit, which also cost twice as much, even though I can do everything the same on this Gear VR, I believe. So the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure your phone's set up also for development. If you haven't done it before, you go to Settings. I'm going to go to the System area. And inside here, so I have developer options showing. If you don't have that yet, you're going to go to About Device, scroll down to Build Number, and this sounds insane, but it's how they buried it. You're going to have Build Number 7 times. Build Number 7 times. Mine's already been done, so it just says Developer Mode is already on. Otherwise, it'll say like click Build Number 6 more times to get Developer Mode. Once you do that, then you should have your developer options showing here. Also on your system menu and your settings. I scroll down, I have to turn on USB debugging. Until I do that, I can't actually hook up my phone to Android app building from Unity, from the Java SDK and all that mess. Okay, so we've got that set up. Next step, so yeah, USB debugging is turned on, just like they say. All right, so now I want to connect to it. And here's where, if I recall, I had a little bit of a deviation from what plan they suggested. So we have to find the Android device ID, the Oculus signature file. That was tougher to find than it should have been. Users, username, library, which of course is a hidden folder, so you need your folders. Show your hidden folders if you're going to try to get to it. There we go. Android. SDK. Great. All right, so now that I'm there, I can go into the Platform Tools folder. Create a terminal window and go there. Let's mimic that path. So present working directory, pwd, users Delion, so cd library, Android, SDK, Platform Tools. There we go, ADB devices. Nope, let's try that / in front of it. Okay, good. So list of devices attached, and you'll see there we have a number. Copy the device ID and continue to the download Oculus signature section. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to the, it's also device ID fetch app, whatever. I'm going to go to tools, device ID. I have to log in first. So let's log into my Oculus account. Okay, and of course if you don't have an account, you create one. And now if I go to the, probably developer. Nope. Let's try it again now that I've logged in, since I couldn't seem to find that link. There we go. Now I can put it in there. Device ID, download file, seconds, there it goes. So okay, so I'm getting a signature file. And you know, I just like to throw mine into that same folder on our desktop. Desktop, Unity projects. I'm just going to stick it in here so it's easier to find later. We're going to need it in a bit. Okay. And that's the end of their instructions, which of course doesn't actually help our situation quite yet. Let's try to wrap this up though. Let's go open up Unity. And I'm going to create a new project, and let's call this Gear VR demo. Put this in my Unity projects folder. Start with the 3D type of project. Of course, you can always change inside Unity. Not going to import any assets at all. Not going to use any of that. Okay, so we've got a new project, a new version Unity editor. I don't care. 5 point whatever should probably be fine for this, and if not, I guess I'll be frustrated in a minute. So we have our file, we have our project. I'm going to first create a 3D spinning cube, just real quick so I can see that there's something there. Move the main camera closer. Game object, align with view. I will also say that it's helpful with your main camera to make it level on the X and Z rotations, so it's kind of straight on eye level. That will help with your orientation when you put on the goggles. That partly affects where it thinks like the whole world's tilted or whatnot. Okay, so I'll put this next to the cube. I'm going to put one little simple script on that cube. So it will spin constantly. Spin cube. Pretty specific name. Update. Transform, rotate. None on X. Let's do like 40.0f times time.delta time. On the Y, around the Y-axis, and none on the Z. So this is just set the cube spinning. And this is just so we can tell, like let's say our view wasn't moving with us inside Oculus, we'd see that there was a 3D cube spinning in front of our face, and that would get us somewhere. Okay, so we have this. I'm going to save the scene, test scene. There's still a few other things we need to set up. So for one thing, we need to add that signature file we have to the project. And to do that, I'm going to go to our projects folder. I'm going to copy this signature file. Inside our project folder for Unity, I'm going to go inside Assets, create a new folder called Plugins. Inside that folder, create a folder called Android. Inside there, create another folder called Assets. Inside there, I'm going to paste the signature file. So there's my signature file within the directory structure of, it's probably easier to see inside Unity, Plugins, Android, Assets, there's your signature file goes. That's just the specific location it's going to be looked for. Now additionally, there's a few other things we probably want to set about our project. We don't necessarily at this point have to, but they'll help. One is if we go to project settings for time, you'll see that we have a fixed time step of 0.02. Let's actually reduce that to 1 with 6 is repeating. It's one of the things we try to do for slightly better frame rate and action and so on when we're in the Gear VR. One of the things you'll figure out is that if it's laggy, it can make people sick. So it's extra important to do optimizations. It's extra important to keep a high frame rate in the Gear VR case. Let's also go to our build settings for our project, where I'm going to select I'm going to add our current scene. Go to Android. Texture compression. On most tutorials I see, I'll suggest that for Gear VR, set this to ETC2 GLES 3.0. We want to see the player settings. Scroll down in here. There's various things we might click. So multi-threaded rendering, also encouraged. Virtual reality supported, of course. Totally important for us. Bundle identifier. This is more of a hassle for iOS apps, but Android still, of course, has it. I believe here we can probably just put away any kind of food we want. Okay, let's put in some stuff here. Test thing. And aside from that, there might be one or two other things we could check. I don't think I'm too worried about those. Yeah, of course, could be exercise left to the reader. So now I should be able to hopefully just build, although I'm going to connect my phone to my computer. So I've got it plugged in through the micro USB. So I'm going to go ahead and do the test build, and let's see what happens. I'm going to call this SpinCube Demo. Save. It's going to go through the build process. Now, one of the things you're also going to want on your phone, if you don't have one already or don't have one handy, or maybe it's buried in one of your menus, is a file manager program. One of the programs on Android that lets you navigate your file system, because getting to these apps that you build on Unity is going to be different than using the stuff you use from Gear VR. When you first plug your phone into Gear VR, it automatically kicks into a mode where you can navigate through the Gear VR store and your library of products you've bought from Samsung. That, of course, isn't how we're getting to our game that we develop. To get to our game that we develop, we need to be able to go to our folders where we can just copy things onto our phone, because we're going to make this build. We're going to have an APK file. We're going to have to install it from our file manager on our phone, and then we can run it as an app on our device. All right, now let's know where my Android SDK is, which of course we've thankfully already found through navigating. Was under library. So you'll see here that under the Delion folder I can see library there cleanly between incremental and model imports demo. I can't see it over there. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just skip past it. Looking at the Android SDK folder. Android SDK. That's of course the folder I want. I'm going to make an alias. And now let's put that into my, I guess you can put it anywhere. I might as well stick it on my desktop for the moment. Well, I'll put it inside my Unity projects folder, since it seems like maybe I want this periodically. All right, so now I can get to it that way. Unity projects, SDK. There we go, it's gonna finish up. Little things like that can seem frustrating when you're working with programming environments and development tools. It's just a part of life, right? It's just part of the process. There's no situation in which you're developing, especially for cutting edge newer hardware, where there's not some sort of weird thing to be messing with. Oh great, so we have an APK file. So now I need to copy that onto my phone. I'm gonna open up my Android file transfer program. And I have to keep a folder called dev test, just a folder I made. Copy SpinCube demo onto it. Just a little 20 megabyte file. So now I open up my SD card storage on my phone, and I guess through my file manager app. Dev test folder, I see right there, SpinCube demo APK. That's the one we exported from Unity. Click that button. It just warns me like, yeah, it's gonna be able to do this stuff on your phone. Are you sure? Yes, I am. I made it. Clicked install. It's gonna take a second to install it. Now I could click open, but I still want to show you where that file lives. By default, of course, it's not on my main screens. It's buried under my additional apps locations, where if I scroll a bit, oh, so one thing to notice is when looking for it, I wasn't seeing what I was expecting, because I was expecting to see SpinCube demo, because that's what I named the APK. What I'm actually looking for is Gear VR demo right there, because that's what we named the Unity project. Gotta look out for that. Now, of course, I could copy this into my developing folder for easier access. And now when I reinstall it, I can get to it through this sort of existing link instead of having to keep digging for it every time through my apps list. There's Gear VR demo. Now it says to insert this device into my Gear VR headset. Let's do it. Okay. Now it says made with Unity. That's a good sign. And takes it a second to load. Haha! Wow! Oh man, I'm in 3D. There's a cube here. It's so 3D. Sorry, I understand that like you can't see what I'm seeing. But so by default, it's already doing basic head orientation stuff. Like I can look up, I can see the sun, I can look down. There's kind of a built-in sun in the skybox. The cube is right here, spinning in front of me. And part of the neat thing you get in VR, because it's 3D, because your eyes have a certain distance apart in space, you get a sense of scale in VR, even a simple Gear VR headset, that you totally do not get normally on a computer screen. As to like, okay, this cube looks about 2.5, maybe 3 feet wide, which makes sense since it's by default 1 unit in Unity size, and 1 unit is about a yard or about a meter in Unity scale. So now I could tell if this cube was really, really tiny or really, really big, not just from its appearance on the size of a screen like a laptop, but because I have to move my head a certain amount, because my eyes provide a certain level of stereoscopy at a certain distance. But, so that is now a thing. I'm going to try to trick it. It does expect this sensor here blocked to tell. And let's see if you can see that at all or not. Yes, so there's the cube. See? That's the cube spinning. And you'll see when I look around, see different parts of it. And of course, I have a slightly different image for each eye. That's how it achieves the 3D look. Now, if I take my finger off, it automatically pauses. It's part of how it behaves. And when I'm done with the app, I just kick it out of there by unclipping, yanking the phone out, and the app quits. Now, another thing to be aware of is how to take input from it. Like I said, it has a tap functionality and a swipe functionality. Within Unity's programming, all that needs is anything that would detect a mouse click acts as a tap. Anything that would detect mouse X, mouse Y changes acts as swiping, your mouse X and mouse Y axis in your code. Now, at least from what I found in my initial playing around with this, I actually have to manually check to determine whether or not I want to count it as a swipe as opposed to a tap. Otherwise, every time I touch it, it still counts as a mouse click. That's not too much code though, but at the very least also it's worth considering that your X and Y coordinates are not super precise. It's not really great for positioning stuff like a trackpad. It really probably should be decomposed into swiping forward, swiping up, that kind of functionality, or plain tapping and holding. But any code you could write in Unity that worked for your mouse click should already work for this, which is pretty handy. Now, one other thing to keep in mind too is that by default, like I said, when I just stuck this on my phone, and notice too, I didn't put any libraries in here. I didn't add any sort of Unity prefabs, any Unity existing stuff. I didn't slap a script on the camera. This is just the main camera. And when I stuck it on the device, it knew what to do. That's part of what's cool about the newer versions of this update. Now, that said, this does also mean that I don't have the same functionality inside the editor that I do in the device in terms of being able to look around. And so for one of my games, for example, one of my test projects right now, I'm working on something where I look around inside the GoldenEye environment from Nintendo 64 era, and I look around and I tap to travel wherever I'm going. And this is the old N64 GoldenEye. And you'll see right now I'm projecting a raycasted dot from the camera, and whenever I click or tap on the device, or press the control key, which might be easier so I don't have the boundaries, I teleport to that spot. And so this allows me to teleport around the level, viewing this stage from any location, which is kind of fun since this is a space that I kind of feel like I spent a lot of time in high school. Now, the thing to consider though is that by default, remember, just sticking my head in the device allows me to use looking around. Whereas in Unity's editor, I had to instead add a script to the player object for mouse look specifically. And my compromise for that was that I went in here and I first test and see if I'm not in the editor, disable this script. That way, when I test it in the editor, my mouse look script is providing my look functionality so I can simulate the ability to look around like I do in Gear VR. Meanwhile, when I start it in Gear VR, it turns off this mouse script so that instead of it reading mouse X and mouse Y, which of course again would be swipe input and not what I want to do, it actually just uses the camera orientation. And then it's a matter of just configuring, making sure I have the right objects under one another to make sure that my raycasts are going the direction I'm expecting, but that's maybe a topic for another day. But basically, that's all you need to do to get a Gear VR app on your phone running on a device. And this might have seemed like an odd amount of effort or too much effort, but I'll tell you what, compared to developing for virtually any other platform in history, let alone virtual reality equipment, things are only getting better and better every year as game developers. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking it out. I look forward to playing the games in the future on VR that you're going to develop. Be Blorp, I am a robot.